I want you to picture something. You're 72 years old. It's a Tuesday morning. The kitchen is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. You're sitting at the table with a cup of coffee that's gone cold while staring at a stack of bills. The numbers don't add up. Your Social Security check just came in, about $1,900 for the month. Rent is $1,100. Groceries are pushing $400 now. Your Medicare premiums and prescriptions take another few hundred. And then the phone rings. It's the mechanic telling you the repair on your car will cost $1,100. You pause, because you don't have $1,100. So you start doing the quiet math retirees do when nobody's watching. Maybe groceries get cut back this month. Maybe the car repair waits. Maybe the prescription refill can stretch another week. And here's the uncomfortable part. This scenario isn't rare. In fact, statistically speaking, this is almost exactly what the typical American retirement looks like. In this video, I'm going to show you the real numbers behind that reality, why so many people end up there, and the few behaviors that quietly separate the people who retire comfortably from the people who spend their retirement doing this kind of math at the kitchen table. Let me show you something that rarely appears in retirement commercials. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median retirement savings for Americans aged 65 to 74 is about $88,400. Not $800,000. Not even $200,000. $88,400. Now there's an important word there, median. Median means half of retirees have more than that, and half have less. It's the middle of the distribution, which makes it one of the most honest numbers in personal finance. Because averages can hide reality. If a few millionaires sit at the same table as 10 people with almost nothing saved, the average looks impressive. But the median tells you what the typical person actually has. And what that number reveals is a reality that's hiding in plain sight. Let's translate that $88,400 into something tangible. Financial planners often reference the 4% rule, which suggests that withdrawing roughly 4% of a retirement portfolio each year gives you a reasonable chance of the money lasting 30 years. 4% of $88,400 works out to about $3,536 per year. That's $295 per month. So the typical retiree's lifetime of savings generates about $295 a month in income. Now at Social Security. According to the Social Security Administration, the average monthly benefit for retired workers in 2024 is roughly $1,900. Combine those two numbers, and the typical retiree is living on about $2,195 per month. That's about $26,000 per year. For context, the U.S. Federal Poverty Guideline for a two-person household sits right around that range, which means the median American retirement lifestyle is hovering just above the poverty threshold. One unexpected medical bill, one housing increase, one major repair, and the entire financial system starts to wobble. And here's the part financial institutions don't put in their advertisements. The uncomfortable truth is that most people don't arrive at this number because of a single catastrophic mistake. They arrive there through dozens of small, completely normal decisions repeated for 40 years. Hey, I'm Brian, and I spend way too much time thinking about the math behind retirement decisions and how small behaviors compound into dramatically different outcomes. If you find these kinds of breakdowns useful, think of hitting subscribe as a kind of peer review. It tells me these deep dives are worth continuing because, frankly, most of what I'm about to show you doesn't show up in glossy retirement brochures. Because once you see the numbers clearly, a different question starts to emerge. Not why retirees struggle, but how so many people end up here in the first place. And to understand that, we have to zoom out and look at the environment people were operating in while they were building their financial lives. If you're new here and just subscribed, comment your name below. I read every comment and shout out new subscribers in my next video. I do appreciate you joining me on this finance journey. Let me zoom out for a moment, because the story behind that $88,400 number doesn't exist in isolation. It's the product of an entire economic environment. Many of today's retirees spent their working years with a set of financial tailwinds that are easy to overlook today. For much of the late 20th century, millions of workers had access to pensions. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in the early 1980s, the majority of private sector workers with retirement plans were enrolled in defined benefit pensions. Those plans guaranteed a monthly income for life, regardless of market performance. Housing was another tailwind. In 1980, the median home price in the United States was about 3 times the median household income, according to historical data from the U.S. Census Bureau. Today, that ratio has often climbed closer to 5 or 6 times income in many markets. College debt was dramatically lower. Stable long-term employment was more common. Healthcare costs, while never cheap, were a much smaller share of household spending. Those advantages mattered because they meant retirement security didn't depend entirely on personal investment behavior. A pension filled in the gaps. A paid-off house stabilized expenses. Long tenures with one employer meant fewer financial resets. But over the last 40 years, those tailwinds gradually turned into headwinds. Pensions largely disappeared and were replaced by 401k plans, shifting the responsibility and the risk from employers to individuals. Housing costs rose faster than wages in many regions. Student debt became a defining feature of younger generations, and job stability declined, leading to more frequent career transitions. None of this guarantees financial failure, but it does mean that the margin for error has become much smaller. Without intentional behavioral changes, the same patterns that produce the median outcome for current retirees may produce an even harsher outcome for the next generation. And that brings us to the core of the issue. Because when researchers dig into retirement data, 5 very specific patterns show up again and again. These are the quiet decision points that push people toward that $88,400 outcome. Let me walk you through them. The first failure point is never starting early. Compounding doesn't reward effort. It rewards time. Imagine 2 workers earning the same salary. One starts investing $300 a month at age 25, earning a long-term average return of 7%. By age 65, that person ends up with roughly $720,000. The second worker waits until age 35 to start saving the exact same amount. They contribute for 30 years instead of 40. Their final balance? About $340,000. Waiting just 10 years cuts the final outcome by more than $380,000. That's the first counterintuitive reality of retirement math. The earliest dollars you invest often become the most valuable dollars you ever contribute. Yet according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, many workers delay serious retirement saving until their mid-30s or later. The clock keeps running while they're busy building careers, paying student loans, or simply assuming they'll catch up later. Which leads directly to the second failure point. The second failure point is the middle-age savings collapse. Early adulthood often comes with optimism. People start saving something. Maybe 5% of income goes into a retirement plan. Then life arrives. A mortgage, childcare, car payments, college savings, healthcare expenses, aging parents. Between ages 35 and 50, the exact years when income typically peaks, retirement contributions often flatten or decline. Let me give you a simple example. Suppose someone contributes $500 a month from age 25 to 35, then pauses contributions for the next 10 years while raising a family. At a 7% return, those early contributions might grow to about $120,000 by age 45. But if they had simply continued that $500 contribution through their 30s and 40s, the balance could be closer to $300,000 by the same age. That decade of interrupted saving quietly erased about $180,000 of future wealth. No dramatic mistake, just life getting expensive. And that leads to failure point number 3. The third failure point is cashing out retirement accounts during job changes. According to research cited by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, roughly 40% of workers who leave a job with a retirement plan cash out their account instead of rolling it over. At first glance, the amounts don't seem massive. Maybe $15,000. Maybe $25,000. But the long-term cost is staggering. A $25,000 withdrawal at age 30, if left invested at 7%, could grow to roughly $380,000 by age 65. So what felt like a temporary financial reset during a job transition quietly erased nearly $400,000 of retirement capital. This is one of the most expensive financial decisions that feels completely ordinary in the moment. And unfortunately, it's extremely common. Which brings us to failure point number 4. The fourth failure point is the catch-up illusion. Many workers assume that if they fall behind early in life, they can simply save more later when their income is higher. And in theory, that sounds reasonable. But the math is brutal. Let's say someone reaches age 50 with $50,000 saved. They want to retire at 67 with about $700,000, a number many planners consider a modest retirement target. Assuming a 7% annual return, they would need to save roughly $2,000 per month for the next 17 years to reach that goal. $2,000 every month. For many households balancing mortgages, healthcare costs, and supporting family members, that kind of contribution simply isn't realistic. So the catch-up plan never fully materializes, and the final balances stay close to the median. Which brings us to the fifth and final failure point. The fifth failure point is playing it too safe with investments. This one surprises people. Avoiding risk sounds responsible, but over long time horizons, excessive caution can quietly sabotage retirement growth. According to data from Vanguard's How America Saves report, a meaningful portion of retirement savers keep large balances in money market funds or very conservative allocations that historically earn far less than the stock market. Let me show you the math. Suppose two investors each contribute $400 a month for 40 years. One earns a long-term average return of 7% through a diversified stock portfolio. The other earns 3% in conservative funds. After 4 decades, the 7% investor ends up with about $960,000. The 3% investor finishes with roughly $370,000. Same contributions, same income, same number of years, but a difference of nearly $600,000, purely because of investment strategy. 5 quiet decisions. Start late. Pause contributions. Cash out accounts. Assume you'll catch up later. And invest too conservatively. Individually, none of them seem catastrophic. But stacked together over 40 years, they quietly guide millions of people toward that median retirement outcome. Now here's the encouraging part. Because when researchers look at households that retire comfortably, they find something fascinating. It's usually not dramatically higher income. It's different behavior patterns. Let me show you the flip side of those failure points. Because when researchers analyze households that retire comfortably, the ones who end up with several $100,000 or even over $1 million saved, the difference usually isn't dramatic income advantages. It's a handful of behavioral patterns repeated consistently for decades. The first differentiator is automation. People who retire comfortably tend to automate their retirement contributions early in their careers. Money flows directly from their paycheck into a 401k or retirement account before they ever see it. Those who reach the $88,400 median outcome often relied on manual saving instead, transferring money when it felt convenient. The math difference is bigger than it sounds. Imagine someone earning $70,000 per year who automatically contributes 10%, or about $583 per month. If that money compounds at 7% for 40 years, it grows to roughly $1.4 million. But someone who saves irregularly, maybe $200 here, $300 there, might average only $250 per month over that same period. At the same return rate, that produces about $600,000 less. Automation removes the need for discipline, and over decades, that small structural advantage becomes enormous. The second differentiator is contribution rate. According to long-term retirement research from Fidelity Investments, many financial planners recommend saving 15% to 20% of income over the course of a career. Yet data from the Employee Benefit Research Institute shows many workers save closer to 5%. The difference sounds small, 10 percentage points. But let's put numbers to it. A worker earning $80,000 who saves 15% invests $12,000 per year. Over 40 years at a 7% return, that could produce roughly $2.4 million. Someone saving 5% or $4,000 per year ends up closer to $800,000. Same career, same income, a retirement difference of $1.6 million. The third differentiator is investment strategy. People who retire comfortably generally maintain a meaningful allocation to growth assets, especially equities, during their working years. Those who retire near the median outcome often drift into overly conservative investments far too early or panic during market downturns. Data from Dalbar's annual investor behavior study consistently shows that individual investors earn significantly lower returns than the market itself because they move money in and out at the wrong times. The market's long-term return might average around 7% to 10%, but many investors capture far less because they sell during declines and re-enter after recoveries. Over 40 years, even a 2% difference in return can translate into hundreds of thousands of dollars. The fourth differentiator is debt management. Households that retire comfortably usually enter retirement with minimal or no debt. Those reaching the median savings level often carry mortgage balances, car loans, or credit card debt into retirement. According to research from the Federal Reserve, the share of retirees carrying debt has increased dramatically over the past few decades. And the math is unforgiving. A retiree with a $900 monthly mortgage payment needs an additional $270,000 invested, using the 4% rule, just to safely cover that housing cost. Debt doesn't just reduce flexibility. It increases the size of the portfolio required to retire. And the fifth differentiator is something many people underestimate entirely: healthcare planning. According to estimates from Fidelity's annual retiree healthcare study, the average 65-year-old couple may need roughly $315,000 to cover healthcare expenses throughout retirement. People who retire comfortably tend to plan for this early, through health savings accounts, dedicated savings, or careful budgeting. Those who don't plan for it often see medical costs slowly erode their retirement savings over time. 5 behaviors: automation, higher contribution rates, long-term investing discipline, entering retirement debt-free, and planning for healthcare. Individually, none of them look dramatic. But over 40 years, they quietly produce completely different financial outcomes. And to understand what the median path actually feels like in real life, let me introduce you to someone whose story reflects the numbers we've been discussing. Margaret is 72 years old. She worked for most of her life as an administrative assistant at a regional healthcare office. The job was stable, the pay was modest, and she did what millions of Americans do. She focused on paying the bills, raising her kids, and assuming retirement would somehow work itself out along the way. By the time she retired at 67, Margaret had saved $92,000 in her retirement accounts. Today, that money generates roughly $300 per month using a standard withdrawal strategy. Her Social Security benefit is $1,847 per month. So Margaret lives on a total monthly income of $2,147. And every dollar already has a job. Her small apartment rent is $1,050. Groceries average about $380. Utilities and phone come to around $210. Medicare premiums and supplemental insurance cost $260. Prescription medications add another $120. Transportation and gasoline run roughly $90. That leaves just $37 at the end of the month. Not for entertainment, not for travel, just a tiny buffer between stability and crisis. Last winter, her car needed an unexpected repair, $1,100 for a transmission issue. She had to put it on a credit card and spend months slowly paying it down. A few months later, a dental procedure cost $700 out of pocket. She postponed visiting her daughter for Thanksgiving that year because the flight was too expensive. None of Margaret's decisions during her career felt irresponsible. She saved when she could. She worked steadily. She tried to be careful with money. But nobody ever sat down and showed her how the math of compounding actually worked. Nobody explained the long-term cost of delaying contributions or cashing out a small retirement account during a job transition in her 30s. And now, decades later, Margaret spends many mornings at her kitchen table doing quiet calculations about what she can afford this month. The cruel irony is that a few small behavioral shifts earlier in life could have produced a dramatically different outcome. Because the gap between Margaret's retirement and a comfortable one is smaller and simpler than most people imagine. Let me simplify this with one final example. Imagine two workers. They both earn $70,000 per year. They both start their careers at age 25. They both retire at 65. Same salary, same timeline, same opportunities. But their behaviors are slightly different. The first worker saves 5% of their income, about $292 per month. The second worker saves 15%, about $875 per month. Neither one makes heroic sacrifices. One simply chooses a higher default contribution. Now assume both investments earn a long-term average return of 7%, which is close to the historical return of diversified stock portfolios according to long-term market data. After 40 years, the first worker ends up with roughly $700,000. The second worker finishes with about $2.1 million. Same job, same income, same economy, but a difference of about $1.4 million. And here's the part that tends to stop people in their tracks. The gap between those two outcomes is only about $583 per month. That's roughly $19 per day, about the price of a modest lunch. In other words, the difference between a constrained retirement and a comfortable one isn't created by massive financial sacrifices. It's created by small daily choices repeated consistently for 40 years. The gap between retirement outcomes isn't created by large sacrifices. It's created by small daily behaviors compounded over decades. So the real question becomes, what should you actually do with this information? Let me leave you with a few concrete steps, depending on where you are in the timeline. If you're in your 20s or early 30s, your most valuable asset is time. Start by automating at least 10% of your income into a retirement account immediately, even if the amount feels small. Increase that contribution by 1% every year until you reach 15% or more. Invest primarily in broad stock index funds while your time horizon is long, and resist the temptation to pause contributions when life gets busy. If you're in your late 30s or 40s, the focus shifts to acceleration. Aim for a combined retirement contribution of 15% to 20% of your income across all accounts. Eliminate high-interest debt aggressively so it doesn't follow you into retirement. And most importantly, avoid cashing out retirement accounts during job transitions. Always roll them over to preserve the compounding. If you're 50 or older, clarity becomes critical. Calculate your current savings, estimate your Social Security benefit, and determine the gap. Maximize catch-up contributions available in retirement accounts. Reduce fixed expenses wherever possible, and build a clear healthcare plan for retirement costs that could reach hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. Because despite everything we've discussed today, the story doesn't end with the median number. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, households in the top quartile of retirement savings often reach balances in the hundreds of thousands or more, while the top 10% frequently surpass $1 million in retirement assets. And interestingly, many of those households didn't earn dramatically higher incomes over their careers. They simply followed different behavioral patterns. The median retiree didn't wake up one day and choose an $88,400 retirement balance. They chose a series of completely normal financial behaviors, and those behaviors quietly produced that outcome over 40 years. Which means the path forward isn't mysterious. It's behavioral. Right now, today, you're standing at a fork in the road that most people never even realize exists. Because that $88,400 number isn't just a statistic. It's the cost of default behavior.